Hi, this is Elizabeth with Felted Sky, here with the instructions for our Cherry Blossoms needle felting kit in our Painting with Wool series of kits. So let's go ahead and open the box and talk about what's inside. So first we have the instruction sheet and the beginner's guide to needle felting. So this is just some good general information to read if you are new to needle felting, and hopefully that will be information that's helpful to you. Then we have the instruction sheet. I just want to point out one thing in here, and that is that this extra set of numbers next to each step, that is the time stamp for the video. So if you want to fast forward or rewind or skip around in the video, you can get exactly where you want to go very quickly just using that time stamp. So that was the instruction sheet. And then in here we have two types of wool. So this is our Felter's Fleece. It is a wool batting, very pretty heathered colors with a lot of nice texture to it. So you'll just want to unroll that and get it ready to start. And you also need to find where it unfolds. Sometimes, as you see, it's not always easy to figure out where it unfolds. There we go. So this is more of a square piece. Sometimes they're longer and thinner, but whatever you have, whatever shape, the long, thin, or the square, you'll be able to use it for the project. So you may want to keep the label with it, or just note the color name that's there on each label, or maybe keep a little tiny piece of wool with the label. We do refer to the color names in the instruction sheet, and I refer to them in the video. So this is our Felter's Flowing Wool. It's a wool batting. So this is twisted up more like a skein of yarn. So you'll want to just untwist it, and then it's folded in half, so you can undo that and just get that ready. And again, note the color name and just kind of keep track of the colors. Alright, so I'll move that out of the way. But there are a few more things to talk about. So of course you have the wooden hoop. This is a nice hoop made in the UK with high quality hardware. So we'll be using that for framing at the end. And then this is our Felter's fabric. It's a linen fabric. So you'll also want to unfold that and get it ready. You may want to iron it ahead of time, but I often just use it with the wrinkles from being folded, and it still works fine. So then we have the needle tube. So you can take out your needles, and this is the needle that's painted blue, so it's the 38 star you can see on the back. So if you need to reorder or something like that, you'll know what needle you need. And there is a spare in the kit in case you break one. You'll have one other one to hopefully complete the project. And needle breakage does happen sometimes when you're new to felting especially. So that's a little bit about the needles. And just a little more about how I recommend holding the needle. So I actually don't recommend holding with 2 fingers like this and poking, or even with 3 fingers held at the very top of the needle. But instead, I recommend putting the top of the needle kind of in the crook of your pointer finger. That's where I like to keep mine. And then, or some people would put the tip on there. That also could work. But the more important thing is to keep some fingers down lower on the shaft of the needle. So your thumb and middle finger a little bit lower. And then some people also like to hold a ring finger there down on the needle. So the idea is just that this is going to hopefully be a little more comfortable and effective and help you have more control of the needle, and also hopefully keep it going straight in and straight out and break less needles that way. So there are a few other things you're going to need to complete the project, and the most important is a foam mat. So here is, or some type of mat. This is our foam mat. So this is a nice dense foam Most people start out on foam when they're needle felting because it's the most economical. So if you're not sure you're going to be doing a lot of felting, this is a good choice. But it will wear out over time and it's not as eco-friendly. So you're going to get maybe a few projects or 5 projects, something like that on each side of it, of this type of a project. More perhaps if you're sculpting. But for longevity, you may want to upgrade to a wool mat. So this is one where I've just felted a little bit on this side, but here's what it looks like after lots of felting. So there are fibers that get stuck in it, as you see. But this is after a couple of months of many projects, and it's still just working as good as when it was new. It's going to last a very, very long time. I don't even know how long yet, but it's 100% wool and a bit more of an upgrade in terms of the money, but it will last a very long time. Plus, I love how it works. Okay, you'll also need scissors to cut off the extra fabric at the end. And then you'll also need some type of glue. So I'm going to use my hot glue gun here, but if you don't have a hot glue gun, you could use another type of craft glue. And that's just to glue the fabric to the hoop at the end, if you're going to use the method that I use for finishing. So just another little bit here to talk about tools. So these are 3 tools that I recommend after having tried many tools. This is a tool to hold a single needle. So if you find that you don't like holding that single needle just between your fingers, this would be a good tool to get because you can have a more comfortable grip there. And this would fit the needles that come in this kit. So you can be using the same needle that I recommend for this project. And then this is another one that you're going to see me use a lot during the video. So this is the Clover tool. It has 5 needles. It does make an annoying sound with the action of its little spring, but I put up with it because it works quite well for speeding up this type of project. So you can still do the project with the single needle. These are not required. They just make it go a little faster. So then this is Clover's other tool with 3 needles. I don't use this as much, so you may or may not see me use it in this video, but I pick it up more for sculpting. So if you do sculpting as well as flat, this is a good tool to have if you're just going to pick one tool. So, and you may already have it, it will work for this project. So if you were going to get them, this is what they look like in your packaging. And of course you don't need all 3, you could just pick one. And we sell them, you can find them other places online or check your local store. Alright, so now that we've talked about all of that, I think we're ready to get started. So you'll want to just get out your mat, put your fabric on it. You can see I have not ironed my fabric, and get out your hoop. And we are starting with the color Spearmint. So I'm just going to start right in here, and I'm going to tear some pieces of Spearmint. You see if you just hold and then tear off the rest, it's an easy way to do it. And then I'm going to get another piece here of the color Dove. So the cream color. And this is the start of our sky. So now I'm going to move the hoop out of the way after using it to kind of see how big I needed my pieces to be. And then I'm going to get the needle and we're just going to start poking. So I'm poking down through the wool and through the fabric and into the mat. And I'm wanting you to be very careful of your other fingers, so I often use my other hand to hold the wool in place and kind of move it around as I'm going, but do be very careful of your other fingers, and pokes do hurt and they do happen, so be mindful of that. I'm of course very practiced in not poking myself after felting for so long. Alright, so we're just going to keep poking. You do want to hear the sound of that mat. If you're on foam, it's a very distinctive sound when you're poking into that foam. And then if you're on a wool mat, you won't hear as much of a sound, but definitely a little bit. and you'll have that feel of poking down into the mat. So we're just going to keep poking like this until the wool is flattened out and all the way attached to the fabric. So that's how we'll know that it's felted enough. And you see I switched to the tool here. So just for the sake of the video, we need to move along a little more quickly. I will also speed up the video here. And if you're with the single needle, you just keep poking until it's all the way flattened out, and it will just take a little bit longer than if you have the tool. So the felting action that is happening, we are actually tangling the little microscopic scales together on the wool fibers. So that's what felting is, and it's the barbs of the needle that are helping us to do that. Alright, so now I'm going to get my hoop again and take a good look at things, and this is the point where you would want to fix any things you may see, like areas that are too thin, where the wool is too thin and you're seeing the fabric through there. Or if you want to blur this line a little bit in between the cream color and our mint color. So I'm putting little wispy pieces of the spearmint on there just to kind of blur that line. And now I could add, I think I'm going to add a little bit more of the dove just to make it a little bit thicker. And I like to keep my fibers going in a horizontal direction, especially for this type of landscape. So here I'm just going to now poke these on. So needle felting is quite forgiving in this way. If you put something on you don't like, you can pull it off almost always. And if you need to cover something up or add on more, you just put another layer on, and once you poke it down, we won't even be able to tell that this wasn't just part of what we initially put down. It's just going to blend right in. So it takes a bit of time, and of course with practice you will get faster as you are poking and kind of develop your muscle memory and your technique. It's really quite simple. We are just poking. And you see here I'm hitting it again with the tool now that I got it kind of tacked down with my single needle. Just need it to flatten all the way out there. And now we can check again. I like to always be checking with the hoop to see what's going to be showing in the end when it's framed. Alright, so now I'm into the color called River Rock, and I'm making the path. So I'm trying to keep my fibers horizontal even when I'm doing this path. So I'm putting in multiple pieces, and we want the path to be a little narrower in the distance and a little wider down here at the bottom of the hoop. We're going to have other grass overlapping this, so the shape does not have to be too perfect. We're just getting it in, but we want to be a little narrower there in the back and wider in the front. Think of a triangle like that. And again, checking with the hoop to make sure I've gone down far enough with the path. And then you can always be arranging it with your fingers first, getting it into place, and then I'll start poking. So I'm going to concentrate first on that horizon line there, getting a nice, fairly straight line, and then I'm going to come down and poke more down the path. And here I'm turning it just because on the video it's a little hard for me to see that line without getting my head in the video. So just poking down the path now. You can see the fluffy wool start to flatten out and attach to the fabric. And I'll go ahead and go over this with the tool. So for these layers that are not very detailed, I do use the tool a lot, as you see, especially when I'm wanting to be moving along fairly quickly. But once we get to the more detailed parts, I will be using a single needle almost exclusively for those. So these pictures are put in layers, so now we're going to go on with our celery color. So this is going to be the grass in our landscape, and I want it to come a little farther over the path here. So you don't have to find one perfect piece. You can do multiple pieces and overlap them a little bit. And then you see I'm kind of tearing off if I have a piece that I want to take a little off of. So it's good to spend some time when you're laying it out, just figuring out exactly how you want it to be. And I always check with the hoop. Since we know we're not going to see everything once it goes into that hoop. And also you can see again, I'm still keeping these fibers, my pieces moving horizontally, straight across. I just think that works better for making it look a little more realistic. And you see there's the path that I'm trying to still preserve a little bit of that narrower in the back and wider, or in the distance rather, and wider down in the front. Alright, so I'm going to poke on this line again first, just to have my horizon line here, where the land meets the sky. And then I'll start poking on the rest of it. And we'll speed up. This is the same kind of thing. We're just getting all of this flattened out. So building a wool painting is just really about all the layers. So we have to get our layers in the background, and then we'll be putting on our trees, which is a little more interesting. Now we have our basic landscape in. And we're going to make the grassy area a little more interesting now. So you can see we've got the sea green color at the bottoms of where the tree trunks are going to be. So this kind of helps you know where to put in those tree trunks if you get this in the right place. So we're going to have one back here, and then same on the other side. We don't want these too big. We still want to see some of our celery grass showing. So the next tree trunk might land there, and then one on the other side. And then these are getting a little bigger, our patches of sea green, getting a little bigger as we get closer to the bottom. So smaller in the distance, good general rule of thumb. And I'm going to check with my hoop. So I need to push these up just a little bit so I make sure the bottom ones are showing and our trees will have somewhere to land there. Alright, that's looking pretty good. It takes me a minute to decide. Sometimes I keep tinkering. And now we're going to get the color called Gecko. So I'm just taking off little wispy pieces of this and then spreading out the fibers some so we can still see our celery wool underneath a little bit, and making this a little bit random, a couple pieces on each side. And now we'll poke all of this down. Oh wait, actually I forgot, I want to get some water lily, so this is the color water lily. So this will be our blossoms in the trees, so I'm going to put just a few little pieces of water lily here on the ground. So I think of that as like blossoms that have fallen on the path and on the grass. I'm picking out the little spots that have the bright pink just to kind of accentuate that in my blossoms on the ground. Alright, so now we will poke down all of these extra little colors we've added on. And we might as well do it quickly. Here I'm adding just a bit more water lily over there in the grass. And again, if you've put something on that you decide you don't like, you can cover it up like I'm doing here. I'm adding a little more celery in a few spots, or you can pull up if you want to. So if you put on a little extra patch of color and you think it was too much or not in the right spot, just pull it off and you can reposition it or even get a different piece of wool and put a different one back on. And I'm just going to make sure we're well poked down, felted into that fabric. Okay, there we have it. Now I'm going to get the color called Bald Eagle, so this is the dark brown roving, and we're going to start putting in our trees. So I'm going to look with my hoop and make sure I'm putting the tree where it's going to be seen enough. So the branch is going to start up there at that tip of the roving. I'm going to pull out the end of the roving a little bit to make it thinner there, and then start poking the end of that branch. So you have to kind of think, where is that branch and then where is the trunk? So it's just going to kind of pull down and become the trunk. And here you see I'm moving it a little bit, so if you put it in and you decide you don't like where it was, you can still move it. So I'm pulling down and stretching that roving out a little bit thinner. And I want to poke it down to where I want the trunk to end, or to start, or however you think about it. So down to the ground, and then I'm pulling off the extra, and we're going to fold that back up onto the trunk. So poke it at the bottom, and then start overlapping it back onto the trunk. And then this can become another little branch. So it's quite thin. That can be another branch, and then I may add some more roving on. So pulling out from the end again, making the line thinner. I'm going to go ahead and attach this one right to the trunk there, and then hold and pull it up thinner. I'm just going to add on to that branch that was a little thin. So that's how we add branches or add on to an existing one. So you just overlap your roving and continue on. So after putting this in, I'm going to keep poking up and down it a little bit, and then I'm noticing places where the sky around the tree needs a little extra poking now that I've put this in. Need to make sure that the area around it is also well flattened and looking nicely attached. So there's that. I think this tree needs another branch or two, so I'm going to again pull out from the tip of that roving to make the thinner line, and I'm going to just overlap it there where I want the next branch to start and pull the extra off. And again, you see I'm really pulling with my other fingers, but do be careful of poking yourself. And there we have our little tree. I might do one more branch, figure out where I want it to go. And my trees never come out exactly the same. Each of these landscapes comes out a little bit differently, and your trees may not look exactly like mine. Of course, this is open to your artistic interpretation as well, so if you have a different idea about your trees, you can make some changes. Okay, so that is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and put in the tree on the other side. So I'm going to start with a branch over here this time. It can overlap our other tree. And now I'm going to pull down into that trunk. We're going to go ahead and speed up because this is put in the same way. So you can always go back to the first one if you need to see it again. So I poke down to the bottom where it touches the ground, and then I'm folding the extra up back into the trunk. And now adding on an extra piece to that branch. And getting it poked down. And we need another branch. Some should be thinner, some a little bit thicker. In general, you want these two trees that are the farthest away in the distance to be the thinnest. Then we'll make the ones that are closer a little bit thicker, wider. Alright, so there's our trees. Now I'm getting out the color Water Lily again, and we're going to put some blossoms on our trees. So this is just little pieces again, and I don't want to fill in entirely, so I want to see some of those branches underneath and still leave some of those showing. So there are our blossoms. Let's go ahead and poke these down. I'll try this other tool so you can see this in action. Or maybe just my single needle. I really do like my single needle a lot. Definitely the most control, and I can do the details that I want. Checking with the hoop to see how much of that I'm going to actually see, and some of it is outside of the hoop. I just need to keep that in mind, and I think I might move this a little bit now that I've checked with my hoop to see what I'm going to see in the end. Sometimes I even open up those fibers in a particular place to see a branch through, peeking through there. All right, I'll just poke a little bit more with the tool. All right, now I'm getting the roving called Pink Lemonade. I'm pulling off tiny pieces and I'm going to roll these in my hand a little bit, in the palm of my hand, and then that's just kind of tangling the fibers up and getting them just a little jumbled. And then I'm going to put them on. So again, just very tiny little wispy pieces. And we still want some of our water lily blossoms showing through and the branches and the sky. So I don't want to fill in completely. That just gives us a little more pink on there. I like that color pink. These cherry blossoms. And now poking it down. And just pulling off a little bit, so as you see, you can keep changing it as you go along. Make sure you're happy with the placement. Okay. Might need to poke a little bit more. I'm always finding something else I want to poke. But we'll go ahead and start putting in the next trees. So these are going to go down to this little patch of sea green, and we want them to be just to the outside of our first trees. So this is a little bit to the left of that first tree. And I'm going to put the branch in first, overlapping there, and then figure out how far I want it to come over until I go down into the trunk. Then again, we go down to where we want the tree to be, and then overlap that little extra piece back up into the trunk. And here I need to put on more of a branch on the other side. We do want this one to be just a little thicker than the first two, so the branches are a little thicker, the trunk is a little bit thicker. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit. So it's looking like you get that feeling of distance. And these branches do overlap our first trees and our first blossoms that we put in. Here I'm checking with the hoop, and I still need to have room for that third tree on that side, so I need to move this over just a bit So it's just going to be just to the right of that first tree we put on this side of the path. Nice branches there, reaching up to the sky. Another one on this side. Okay, so now we can put our blossoms on this set of trees. So I'm going back to the water lily color. And I'll poke all this down. Maybe we'll go ahead and put our pink lemonade on first. So just my little wispy pieces, and I'm jumbling up those fibers a bit because I don't want them straight across right now. I want them to be a little more rounded organic shapes. Some highlights on there of our other pink. Alright, so now I'll poke down. I'm going to go ahead and leave the video sped up for these last two trees. So putting them in just the same way as before. But these will be the thickest tree trunks and the thickest branches. So just trying to get them a little bit thicker than the two previous trees. Since they are the closest to us, they should be the biggest. And now I'll go to the one on the other side. I'm going to check with my hoop and make sure I'm putting it in a spot where we're going to see enough of it. Okay, and now I'm putting on the blossoms. And now the pink lemonade. Usually kind of at the top of these areas I've just done in water lily, with highlights at the top of our other pink color. And now poking them down. This is really the final thing we're going to add. Make sure you're liking how it's looking. Okay, so there it is. One more check with the hoop. And I've decided maybe I need to move this in closer because I'm not seeing as much of it. So as you see, I just pulled it up, moved it over, we'll just poke it back down. Okay. So I'm liking it well enough. We will go ahead and pull it up off of the mat. So it can take a good tug. It does get quite stuck. We've done a lot of poking on it, and those fibers go down into the mat. So it does take a little tugging to get it off of there, but it will come off. And there it is. So there's the back. I always think the back looks kind of neat. Alright, so now I'm going to take a look at it now that it's off the mat. We still have one more thing to do, which is to go over it all again. So when it's off of the mat, it really loosens up quite a bit because that mat was holding all those fibers. So we need to make sure that they are felted well enough just into the fabric, because that's all that's going to be holding them when we put it into the hoop. So now I just like to go and poke over the whole thing again, any areas that are looking like they're fuzzy or they're not all the way sticking to the backing. This is also the time to add more wool to any areas that are looking thin or where you might be seeing the fabric coming through a little bit. So I'll probably spend another 15 to 30 minutes just poking on this. But for the sake of the video, I'll be doing most of that off camera. Alright, so here it is again after my extra poking. And I decided I needed to add a bit more as I was poking, so I added those two little areas. So work on yours until you feel like it's all the way finished and very secure to the fabric, and then we'll go ahead and put it in the hoop. I usually have to open the screw quite a bit since we have the wool. It gets a little bit thick there. So I'm just getting it positioned just how I want. Sometimes it takes me a few times to get it just where I want it and to get that hoop to where it will stay if the wool is quite thick. Still need to open that a little bit more. Okay, I think that will work. So then we need to pull with the fabric a little bit just to make sure it's nice and taut in the hoop. Pull it tight and make sure it's not puckered or loose in there. All right. Looking pretty good. Just going to pull a little bit more up here. Okay, now I'll tighten the screw. I usually just go as tight as I can get with my fingers, but you could get a tool if that helps you and get it quite tight. Okay, so we're going to turn it over, and I'm going to grab my scissors, and we're going to cut off the extra fabric. I'm just going to cut to about 1 inch. I'm leaving there. Oh, we had a blooper in the video, but not that big a deal. So about 1 inch on the fabric sticking out from the hoop. And then I'm going to get my hot glue gun, and I'm going to put a couple inches of glue and then quickly fold over my fabric till it's holding on to the glue there. So this is just the way that I like to finish my wool paintings that I put into hoops. But you might find a different way that you like. There are certainly other YouTube tutorials about how to finish hoop art, or you might find some good blogs. But I'm not going to cover my back here with fabric or felt. I'm just going to turn the edges over, and I like to see the back side of the picture. I just think it looks kind of cool, so I don't want to cover it up. And this is the method that just seems quick and easy to me. I think it finishes it nice enough. So here it is. So I hope you like the way that your picture turned out. And if you are in need of other kits or felting supplies, I hope you'll visit us at feltedsky.com. And we'd love to hear from you there if you have any comments or questions. So as always, happy felting!